Admiral William Owens, former Vice Chairman, U.S. Joint Chief of Staff, who served as commander of the United States Sixth Fleet from 1990 to 1992. He was a military assistant to secretaries, as I mentioned, but also began your career, served 4 strategic nuclear power submarines as 3 nuclear attack submarines, including tours commanding officer aboard the USS Sam Houston, the USS City of Corpus Christi, and also spent a total of 4,000 days. That's more than 10 years aboard submarines, including duty in Vietnam. Any close calls back in all of that? And also, are any of those stories in the book that you authored in 2000, Lifting the Fog of War?
Well, thanks, Paul. I mean, a lot of things happen in that amount of time underwater, and so there's too many stories, I'm afraid, but lots of interesting ones, and I can tell them. If you have time, I have time to tell them.
I would like to hear one. We have limited time, but I'd like it. I got to get you on again, but I'd love to hear one if you've got it.
Well, there was one interesting one. I was a captain of a fast attack submarine, and we were off the coast of China, fairly close to the shore, and I had been warned by my admirals that there were a lot of junks floating around out there, and be careful, they said, when we come from deep to periscope depth, from deep water to shallow water, because you might stick a periscope through one of these guys. And sure enough, one night I came shallow, and I stuck a periscope through the bottom of a Chinese junk, and I realized, of course, that I had been told, if that happens, lower the scope and get the hell out of there. Now I had a periscope through a junk, and I had a little family on the end of my periscope, so I made a decision. I would do the same thing, but it wasn't what my admirals had said, and I brought the little Chinese family on my submarine, and there were 2 really frightened people, myself and the father. The mother was down below eating ice cream with the 2 kids, and they knew now that we were not going to kill them. And it was a great thing. We dropped them off to a British destroyer off of Hong Kong several days later, and I was not in a good way with my admiral when I got back to Pearl Harbor, I tell you.
That would make a good television series right there. The whole thing would make a great script to be written. I do need to ask you this. The U.S. Navy fired some warning shots on 3 Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of some small boats, these patrol boats.
Right.
The warning shots by the U.S., we didn't have this. I think there were some at the beginning of the Trump administration, and I frankly think that Iran believed, as many people in this country, that Trump was crazy enough to annihilate them, and that stopped any of this, and now it's back again. But your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we have to remember that our forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, are all out around the world, and they're faced with these many challenges almost every day. And so I think we're blessed by these military commanders out there who are representing our country, and they make wise decisions about these kinds of things. I think this particular thing yesterday, I think, was a Coast Guard ship, Coast Guard cutter, and we now have Coast Guard ships deployed with the U.S. Navy around the world. And so, the Iranians challenge us. We should damn well give a few warning shots to state that that's dangerous. Don't do that again. And apparently that's what happened with these guys. But I think that stuff goes on around the world, Paul, almost every day, in the Mediterranean and in the South China Sea, et cetera. And we've got to give these commanders a lot of credit for making the right decisions to not get us into something we don't want to get in, but at the same time letting anybody who would affront us know that it's not going to be allowed. So good for them for doing this. And apparently the Iranians backed away.
Yeah.
And so it's just another good object lesson.
From the first days that you served on the first submarine, and you look at what's available now, the technology's got to be just incredibly advanced.
It's an amazing time, Paul. And I think look at the grand range of technology. And I'm afraid it's not the military's fault for sure, but somehow the way we procure things just doesn't allow us in the military to take advantage of all of that great stuff, the digitization of everything, the Internet of Things. The military tries very hard to do that, but how do you ever get the four services together to take full advantage of that total range of technology? And it's stunning what America has done. The Chinese do it very well, but we don't do it very well. We don't bring that commercial technology into defense capability. And, the Congress really needs to look at jointness. We need to look at defense procurement, and then we need to look at this area of new technologies and how we can implement them in the military for the sake of our country and for our young people out there who are in danger.
That is a little bit disappointing to hear you say that. In other words, because it's not the private sector, it is the industrial complex. We're not using the best that we possibly could as far as advanced technology. I know that there are things on the board, and sometimes they stay on the board a long time, and people haggle about it. And I also know that by the time you get powerful congressmen from one state battling a powerful Congress from another for the contract, it's not so much about the technology, it's who's got more power in Washington.
There's so much of that, as you know, Paul. I mean, I lived a good part of my life in Washington, and one is tempted to say it's not American to see that go on, but it is part of our American system, and we just need to find better ways of defense procurement. It's not because of the Pentagon, I think, as much as it is the politics, the 50 states, the jobs in the 50 states, and a great complexity of defense procurement, I'd have to say that. But we've tried for decades to reform it, and it just doesn't get reformed.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this.
Your military's fault.
Your assessment from the days that you were still active as far as in Washington, D.C. as the U.S. Joint Chief of Staff, and what you hear, what you see when you talk to your colleagues today, are we on even par with China? Are we behind China? Or are we still ahead of China?
Well, Paul, we're way ahead of China, and that's good. We should stay very strong. I think we could do that for a lot less money. I would be tempted to say we should take a serious cut of that defense budget again and wind up with a stronger military by using the technologies that America has provided. But the Chinese they spend probably, when you show how much they actually spend, half of what we spend, and they do wind up with a lot more buying power. So they are going to be the number one economic nation in the world soon, and they want to have a quality military. I lived in China for 8 years, Paul, and I would just say we need to look very carefully at the relationship with China. I wrote a book recently called China U.S. 2039, The End Game. And unless we take some wise decisions here, we are going to put our kids in danger if we don't be a little smarter about the way we do things. So we do not want to fight the Chinese. The Chinese do not want to fight us, and we need to find a way forward to compete with those people. They're pretty good people. Their leader is leading them in some wrong directions, but we need to remember that this is going to be a very different world in 20 years.
Well, one of the reasons, and you mentioned this, one of the reasons they can do it more efficiently than we can is because we've given them our intellectual property, so all they've got is just to go by the blueprints, and they've got it made. I wish we had more time. Got to get you back on, sir. It's been a